Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this. Lauren Price is set for her first title defense on the Jonas versus Habazin undercard, laying the foundations for what could be the unification match between them, between Lauren Price and Natasha Jonas. Welsh Olympic star Lauren Price will defend her WBA welterweight title in Liverpool against Colombian contender Matias, who we talked about. If Price comes through it, and I think she will likely fight the bill topper on the December 14th show at Liverpool's Exhibition Centre, Natasha Jonas, who clashes with Ivana Habazin. Price is 7-0 and defeated Jessica McCaskill in Cardiff in May. The gold medalist is 30 and from...
What does that say? What the hell is that, Gaelic?
In any event, she has yet to lose a round as a professional. Matias is the WBA's number 5 contender and is 7-0 with 6 KOs, but is fighting outside of Colombia for the first time. Quite the step up in class for Bexy. I'm excited to be out defending my belts to finish what has been a big year for me, said Price. I have full respect for Matias. I'll prove I'm the best in the division, and I won't let anything or anyone stand in my way of becoming undisputed. Undisputed. That involves Natasha Jonas, rather the winner of Jonas versus Habazin, but it also involves Mikaela Mayer
at some point next year.
And so you figure that if Natasha Jonas and Lauren Price are fighting on the same bill, they're on the same schedule, the both of them could return to action in the second quarter of next year.
You know, they're fighting in December, fighting in January or February. That's too quick a turnaround. So maybe they come back at the end of March to face each other, or April, May.
Say towards the end of the first quarter of next year or the beginning of the second. All the while, Mikaela Mayer will not have access to either of them. So what does she do? Who does she fight?
It's a good question.
Boxer promoter Ben Shalom said, "It's a huge night for the women's welterweight division with 3 world champions in action. Natasha Jonas is back in her hometown for a must-win unification fight against Ivana Habazin, and Lauren Price defends her world titles against unbeaten contender Bexy Matias. The battle for Undisputed is on. If Natasha and Lauren both win on December 14th, it will set the stage for a massive Battle of Britain world title unification matchup next year.
An in-house affair.
In-house for Boxer, not in-house for Mikaela. She doesn't want to be in that house. She said it. She doesn't want to have to go back to the UK for a fight. She's done doing that. She spent 2 years out there.
Then how do they get these fights done? And what does she do in the in-between time while she waits?
The former WBO welterweight champion Sandy Ryan took to her social media to make a suggestion. Hello, Mikaela Mayer. Not much options going on, so are we getting this rematch sorted? I'll have some drama ready for fight week this time. Don't worry, I know you like some drama.
What's she talking about?
She's talking about the paint incident. Somebody took it upon themselves to douse Sandy Ryan with red paint en route to the garden. Sounds to me like Sandy is suggesting that Mikaela was somehow involved. She posted this video.
You guys will find out. You guys will find out. I'm going to save it for fight week, but y'all will find out.
Okay. Yeah, I felt like you were selling the fight like too soon, like in this little package, right? They got to tune in fight week, press conference, get all
Tune
right.
in fight week. There's a little bit more drama.
That's from before the fight, you understand. That's from well before the fight leading into it. Mikaela Mayer warned that during fight week there would be some drama, and the most in terms of drama we saw during fight week was Sandy Ryan being doused with red paint. Now, Sandy Ryan, God love her, she's not so well known that some random guy, some Joe Blow, would have just taken it upon themselves to douse her with red paint, because how would they have even known what hotel she was staying in, or at what time she would leave the hotel to head over to the garden?
That's privileged intel that only somebody on the inside would be privy to.
Eddie Hearn said that the NYPD was going to be conducting an investigation. That was many, many weeks ago, and I don't know where they are now in terms of that investigation. Besides, in a big city like New York, the NYPD have more pressing matters to tend to than a tourist being doused with red paint, because by the time they're done conducting their investigation, said tourist will be safe and sound back home. So I don't get the sense they dedicated a whole lot of time to that, but Sandy Ryan didn't forget, and why would she? It seems obvious to everyone that Michaela may have had some involvement in that, and she wants her lick back.
Not unifying titles with Natasha, Jonas. You're not unifying titles with Lauren Price.
But I bet you want to be in a big fight, don't you? A meaningful fight, a significant fight. Well, Sandy Ryan, a rematch with Sandy, that would suffice. Will Michaela do it?
I don't think so.
For Michaela and her team, it may seem like more trouble than it's worth. All she has to do is wait for the winner of Jonas versus Price.
She can make a voluntary defense of her newly obtained WBO title on somebody's undercard while she waits.
Do I think she's gonna give Sandy a crack at the apple the way Sandy gave her one? Short answer, no.
Sorry.
Solutions, because I don't think Michaela will elect to fight Sandy again while she waits for the winner of Jonas versus Price. She can always find some girl at welterweight to keep busy with. What she needs is a keep busy fight, a voluntary title defense. And Sandy, seemingly frozen out of the world title picture at 147, she can always move up and wait and start a campaign at 154, which isn't as hot a weight class, but sooner or later the girls at 147 will move up to 154. This is just you getting a head start. You maybe target Mary Spencer for her WBA title, or Emma Cozen for the 2 belts she's got.
O'Shea Jones is up there.
I know. That O'Shea Jones, if Sandy were to move up there, might make it her business to go after her, but that's an occupational hazard you have to deal with.
Momentarily, she's frozen out of the world title picture at welterweight.
So she can keep busy winning titles at junior middle. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Oscar De La Hoya says it's the fighters who are killing the sport.
Oftentimes when we talk about the politics of boxing and why certain fights don't happen, the usual conclusion that people come to is the promoters are protecting their assets, they're protecting their fighters. Oscar is going against the grain. He's not going to take the heat for it.
Oscar De La Hoya has said the fighters are to blame for the poor health of boxing. On his weekly Clapback Thursday social media segment, De La Hoya told his 1.2 million followers on Instagram that he felt the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson spectacle was scripted, adding that it was a horrible fight. It was just awful. It was wishful thinking for all those idiots who thought they were going to get Mike Tyson of the 90s to come out and rip somebody's head off, De La Hoya said. De La Hoya, however, gave credit to Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano for putting on an incredible, real fight. But he captioned his post stating, "Boxing is dead, but who is to blame?"
That's rich coming from him.
He tagged in Canelo, Mike Tyson, and Jake Paul. "Boxing has been in hibernation," said the Hall of Fame fighter turned promoter. "It's like a sleeping bear. Boxing has been the most popular sport since the beginning of time. Lately it's been Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, who fought in the ring, not the octagon, because boxing is king. We have to get our shit together. Fighters are not daring to be great, and we are stuck accepting mediocre fights. Look, being a fighter and now a promoter, knowing the ins and outs because I'm in it, I have to say, it's the fighters who are killing the sport. People try to blame the promoters or the managers or the trainers. No, it's the fighters. I was one, and I can tell you that if my camp urged me to fight someone and I wanted to fight someone else, we're gonna fight who I wanted to fight."
Evidence of what Oscar De La Hoya is suggesting. There was a plan in play to put Stephen Fulton back in the ring with Brandon Figueroa last year. They wanted Stephen to move up in weight, but the story was Stephen didn't want to do that. He wanted to fight Naoya Inoue in Japan, and that's what he did. It didn't work out. But it is evidence of what Oscar is suggesting, that when the fighter wants the fight gets made.
It was the same with Errol Spence Jr. There was a plan in play for Errol to move up to 154 and fight Keith Thurman. Errol chose to forego that, chose to fight Terrence Crawford instead.
That's more evidence of what Oscar is saying. When the fighter wants the fight gets made.
Oscar De La Hoya continued. Fighters today don't think they're getting paid enough, or they're scared of taking an L. For example, back in the day, Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward weren't the most popular fighters and weren't getting paid the most during their time. But we respect them today because they fought their hearts out and came back for another day. The UFC fighters, they're getting paid peanuts and they go out on their shields. But in boxing, we know the outcome of the big fights these days before the fight even starts. Look at the Canelo fight. De La Hoya then lambasted Berlanga for celebrating going the distance with the Mexican icon and continued taking a further shot at his former fighter Canelo. This is where we're at because it comes from the top. Look at the 90s. You had Prime Tyson, Julio Cesar Chavez, myself, Felix Trinidad. We were warriors. We fought everyone. We created sexy mega fights that everyone looked forward to watching. In the 2000s, boxing had Mayweather, and it became boring and defensive for a decade. And most recently, we have Canelo, who is the most boring but the most popular boxer today.
So is Oscar De La Hoya right? Is it really the fighter's fault?
I mean, yeah. Sometimes it's the fighter's fault. Sometimes the fighter, the team, the manager. Other times it's the promoter.
It's not one way.
Remember when Showtime was willing to put up money for Jaime Munguia to box Jermall Charlo on their side of things? Who stood in the way of that?
Oscar.
Oscar was the one who said DAZN had to be involved, and if no DAZN, no fight.
You can't put that on Jaime Munguia.
Remember what he told Shakur Stevenson about his Zepeda fight a couple of months ago? That unless Shakur signs the Golden Boy, he ain't gonna do the fight.
But if not, if Golden Boy is like, hey, we want to get you this fight before we get you a big fight, I'll take Lucas' body. But I got my eyes set on Shakur. And like I said, the team, they'll let us know something about tomorrow, so we'll know for sure.
Yeah.
Floyd Schofield made it a point to call out Shakur Stevenson after the collapse of the Zepeda fight. Now what he's saying is that if the people at Golden Boy want to take him in another direction, then it just is what it is.
So who's stopping that fight from happening? Is it Golden Boy or is it Floyd?
It's not that Oscar De La Hoya is wrong in his evaluation, it's that it's a partial evaluation because yes, sometimes it's the fighters and their teams, but other times it's the promoters.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
So when a Brian Norman forgoes a unification match with a Jaron Ennis, well, that boils down to the fighter.
But when Oscar didn't want to send Jaime Munguia to Showtime for that Charlo fight, well, that wasn't Jaime Munguia's fault. It was yours.
When you told Shakur Stevenson that he won't get Zepeda unless he signs the Golden Boy, that's not really Williams' fault. That was yours. Now, this latest situation, the quote-unquote injury, that's something separate.
The crux of it is that two things can be true at the same time.
Oscar is right. The fighters, to some extent, are to blame, but that doesn't change that he himself is part of the problem.
Because it's not always the fighters.
So if we explore Oscar's contribution to this conversation, how are the fighters contributing to a seemingly stagnant boxing scene here in America? And I emphasize here in America because the British boxing scene is bigger than it's ever been, the Asian boxing scene is bigger than it's ever been, and the Australian one.
Those are flourishing markets.
The Mexican boxing scene is doing just fine as well. It's the American boxing scene that is stagnant. What happened? Because it does seem like it used to be easier to make a fight between two top-level American fighters.
What happened?
Floyd Mayweather happened. It all starts in the Mayweather era, and so many fighters who came after him trying to follow in his footsteps, but not being Floyd Mayweather, as talented as Floyd Mayweather, but negotiating like they are.
American fighters.
Too many fighters with too little talent and too many demands. To blame Floyd Mayweather directly, Floyd ushered in the era of the business-minded fighter, and there were so many who admired him for that, for his seeming business savvy. They wanted to imitate it, replicate it, so they can have some of that success for themselves, and that led to a more cautious American boxer, more careful.
Doesn't really want to roll the dice.
Tack on the inception of Al Heyman's PBC. That had an adverse effect on the American market that I think most boxing fans don't realize. How was Al Heyman able to funnel something like 150 or 200 fighters from Golden Boy over to what became his PBC? How did that happen? Well, it was the Waddle and Reed money that made that possible, and how quickly he burned through it.
This is a long story, so I'll just give you the short version. Al was able to overpay those fighters for what were soft fights. In exchange, he got their loyalty.
The negative effect that it had was, if you're paying guys X amount of dollars for a soft fight, just imagine how much more money they're gonna want for a hard one. This made the fights harder to put together because now every Joe Blow with two hands and a gum shield thinks you gotta pay up the wazoo to get him in the ring.
Risk-averse fighters.
To the point where the American boxing scene stagnates as a result. Too many guys that don't want to roll the dice, don't want to take a chance. Too many fighters that are not thinking like fighters and behaving like fighters. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Suddenly, boxing is not as exciting as it used to be. Doesn't really capture the crowd's imagination because they see a fight, they know what's gonna happen.
$80 to see Gervonta Davis fight Frank Martin in a fight where you know how it ends. It's the same with Lamont Roach. It's the same with most of Gervonta's fights. He's a more crude example of what we're talking about.
Fights like that don't capture the imagination.
When Oscar says that the fighters are to blame,
There is truth in that.
when a Teofimo Lopez chooses to sit out the rest of the year when he could have fought Brian Norman, or when Brian Norman chooses not to fight Jaron Ennis, he chooses to fight a Derek Cuevas instead.
Enough fighters with an attitude like this, the boxing scene suffers for it. It stagnates. And that's what happened in America.
Do you know that a part of the reason that women's boxing has been on the rise the last couple of years is because you don't gotta twist the girls' arms to fight each other?
You'll get two top-level girls in the ring to fight each other before you can get two guys to do the same thing. The guys actually have more demands.
More difficult to deal with, more expensive. So a part of the reason that women's boxing has been on the rise is because it speaks to why people watch boxing in the first place. They want to see two fighters go in there and have it out. Risk it all.
Go for it.
Where many of the male boxers let the air out of the tires. They suck all the air out of the room. It's not exciting.
So why should people watch it?
Well, you'll notice that they don't. And nowhere near the same abundance as they used to. Because a long time ago, boxing was at the forefront of the American sporting world. Now, it's somewhere in the background.
Occasionally poking its head out whenever it can put together a decent-sized fight.
Occasionally. But the guys who have been watching the sport long enough know that it's not now what it once was. At least not here. In other markets it's bigger, but not in this one.
Blame the fighters.
Oscar De La Hoya did, and there is blame to assign.
While it's not always the fighters' fault. No, not always. Sometimes it's the promoters.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's the promoters, sometimes it's the fighters. Because this era of fighters don't want to behave like fighters.